Administration offered conflicting stories about the fate of now former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The White House tried to give one simple explanation. Flynn lost the trust of the president, and it was time to go.
The evolving and eroding level of trust as a result of this situation and a series of other questionable instances is what led the president to ask for General Flynn's resignation.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer says it was Flynn who sealed his own fate by misleading top administration officials, including the vice president, about his phone conversation about sanctions against Russia with the Russian ambassador during the transition. But Spicer declined to say whether Flynn had intentionally lied about the call.
I don't know that it was intentional. He may have just forgotten, but I think at some point, trust isn't just a trust.
Forget though, the conversation.
But that's the point, Jim, is that at some point that trust eroded to a point where the president did not feel comfortable with him serving in that position and asked for and received his resignation.
In his resignation letter, Flynn would only say he inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. The White House says there were questions about Flynn's story. Last month, the Justice Department relayed its concerns about the call to White House counsel Don McGahn, who informed the president. Spicer says a White House investigation concluded there was nothing illegal about Flynn's actions. All of that raises questions as to why the president claimed he didn't know about a report about the matter when he was asked about it Friday.
I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that? I haven't seen that. I'll look at that.
He was asked specifically was he aware of a Washington Post story? He hadn't seen that at the time.
Spicer deflected questions about what the president knew and when he knew it by claiming Mr. Trump had been tough on Russia.
The irony of this entire situation is that the president has been incredibly tough on Russia.
To a lot of Americans, it seems that this president has not been tough on Russia. How can you say that?
I think there's a difference between the president wanting to have an understanding of how a good relationship with Russia can help us defeat ISIS and terrorism throughout the world. Look, the Obama administration tried to have a reset with Russia. They failed.
And there are other questions, such as why White House counselor Kellyanne Conway seemed to back up Flynn just hours before he resigned.
General Flynn does enjoy the full confidence of the president.
Were you out of the loop on this?
No, not at all. Both were true. The president is very loyal. He's a very loyal person, and by night's end, Mike Flynn had decided it was best to resign. He knew he'd become a lightning rod, and he made that decision.
Clearly frustrated by the spectacle, top Republicans say the president had no other choice.
You cannot have a national security advisor misleading the vice president and others. So I think the president was right to ask for his resignation, and I believe it was the right thing to do.
Michael Flynn's resignation as national security
is perhaps the most important function or responsibility a president has. And I think the president made the right decision to ask for his resignation. You cannot have a national security advisor misleading the vice president and others. So I think the president was right to ask for his resignation, and I believe it was the right thing to do. Let's speak about Russia for a second. I've always been a Russia skeptic and hawk. New administrations these days try to get better relations with Russia. The Bush administration tried to get better relations with Russia. The Clinton administration, or Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration did the reset. So I understand it's reasonable and rational to try and improve relations with Russia. That's what new administrations inevitably do. But I'll leave it up to the administration to describe the circumstances surrounding what brought to this point. I think the key is this, that as soon as this person lost the president's trust, the president asked for his resignation, and that was the right thing to do.
Makes it impossible for President Trump to even talk of lifting sanctions against Russia?
I don't know. Here's what I do know, that I would fight to my last ounce of breath here to prevent this administration or any other administration from lifting sanctions against Russia for their invasion of the Ukraine and the seizing of the Crimea and all the other things they have done since then, to include interfering in our own election. I don't think they changed the outcome, but they tried to interfere in our election. They've never been punished for that behavior. The current sanctions have nothing to do with what they tried to do in the 2016 election. They deserve to be punished, because if you don't punish Russia, you're screaming weakness to Putin. Iran and China could do the very same thing in 2020 if they get mad at Trump. So it's important that both parties come together here in a bipartisan fashion to punish Russia for trying to interfere in our elections. And if General Flynn was contacting the Russian ambassador about lifting sanctions imposed by President Obama before they took office, I want to know why he made that phone call. Did he do it by himself, or was directed by somebody else? Because it does run afoul of the one president at a time policy.
One quick clarification. When Roy Blunt says he wants to have an exhaustive investigation into Donald Trump's personal contacts with Russia and how that has played out, is that now part of the investigation that you will be conducting into Russian contacts?
Well, I don't have any evidence that the president has exhaustive contacts with Russia. I am focused on what Russia did in our election and what they're trying to do to undercut democracy all over the world.
Does this change your investigation now, this news?
I think what we need to know is the contacts between General Flynn and Russia before they took office, and whether or not there was any information the Russians had that could have compromised him, because that goes to the ability of any administration to operate.